Hi everyone! So the moment you've all been waiting for, instructions for the final project. It's called the term project here. Same thing, term project, final project, whatever. In a way, term project works better because in the weeks starting week 10 and until the end of the semester, the weekly activities, at least half of the time you'll be spending on the weekly learning activities will be spent actually on working on this and then looking, finding different sources that you can read on your chosen topic. So I'll go over the instructions verbally with you here. I'll try to find a time when I can host like a kind of a little info session on a Monday or something during our scheduled class time, so that after you've had time to look this over, you can come and ask questions, because I know people wind up having questions even after reading it and hearing it, because I can't always anticipate all the questions that we'll get. So the idea behind the project is that each of you gets to pick a topic that you'd like to work on, and I'm very flexible in terms of what that topic is. I really want it to be driven by your interests. So it can be something that we covered this semester already, or that we're going to in the next few weeks, or a blend of those. And I give later on there's more kind of concrete suggestions, but if there's something we've already talked about and you're like, you want to focus on this and dig into more depth on any of those topics, or a blend of them, right? Because as you've noticed, and we've commented on this in our Zoom discussions, there are always connections to be made between the different topics, and it's kind of like this kind of story arc as we're going along. So if there's two kind of small things from different weeks that are connected and you want to explore that in more depth, that's fine. It can be a brand new topic because there's so much out there, we don't have time to cover everything in this course. So this is the opportunity for you to branch out if you'd like, if there's something related to your field of study or your career or a hobby or something. Anyway, we'll go into more details, but basically, starting page 3, there are topic ideas. You might have, also your journal. Go look back at the journals, because for some of you, sometimes you'd mention things that occurred to you. And sometimes I would write, hey, you might consider this for your final project. So you know how I keep nagging people to keep everything together week to week in the journal, my feedback? So if you've been doing that, your most recent journal has a record of our entire conversation this summer. So you can always go back if you remember me commenting on that, or you want to see what's come up for you so far. You can go and mind that for ideas as well, or you can book a time with me and we can brainstorm if you're still kind of, I don't know. So what you're going to do then to learn more about this topic is you're going to read or reread if you're dealing with older, things we've already looked at and you might want to re-go in, more depth. So watch, read, watch. Oh, there's a watch missing there. I'll fix that. Read, watch, or reread, rewatch the appropriate sources or other sources that you might find after you've talked to me. I'm always willing to meet with people to kind of help figure out where to look. And you'll produce a work that provides an overview of your topic, discusses why the topic is important for people to know about. So it's not, again, as I've been doing with the journals, it's where I want to make this not just an intellectual exercise, but just kind of think, how does this involve you, right? So why is it important for people to know about this? How does this knowledge have an impact on your own life? So for example, does it elicit a desire to spread more awareness about the topic, and how do you think you might go about that? Ways in which this knowledge might help them do better in your future career, right? So if you're going into law or health or anything, well, how might the knowledge that you've learned through this project help you do a better job? How might it affect your personal life, your relationships, your identity, just things like that, right? So again, as with the journal, I'm really trying in this course to kind of bring in the ways of knowing that go beyond just intellect, right? So you have a bunch of options here, and I know it might be overwhelming, but I really do want to provide you with this opportunity that I know that you don't often get in college, to kind of branch out of that very traditional Western style research paper. Okay, now you can do that if that's what you're comfortable with, and you're like, you know what, I want to practice this as much as I can because I'm going into university and I know I'm going to have to do a lot of this. That's fine. that is your choice. And most students, I give options like this every time I teach this course or similar courses in Indigenous Studies, and most students go for the traditional essay because it's what they're used to and they know what to expect. And if that's what you really want, that is fine. You won't be judged. Okay, so what we're going for here, we're in a 200 level course, so we're looking at 750 to 1,000 words. That sounds overwhelming when you look at those numbers, but as you probably know by now, this is not terribly long. We're looking at 3, maybe 4 pages max, and so the essay is worth, like, because this whole thing is worth 15%, this term project. So in this case, the essay, if this is what you're doing, option 1, the essay is worth the full 15%. And so, the typical stuff, you have an introduction, a development divided into paragraphs by topic, and a conclusion. And I'll be providing resources, over the course of the semester for good essay writing. There are already some on Leah and on my resource page. If you want to write something more creative, I'm very open to that. Okay, so again, similar length, and if that's all you're doing, you're writing a piece of creative writing, that's worth 15%. And here are some examples, and you're not limited to these examples, but this is something I did, like an imaginary, well, actually, no, I did see once in university, like a script for a little play where the two authors I was comparing were arguing with each other in a bar, and I appeared as the ghost of anthropology future to correct them both. So things like that can be fun. An imaginary conversation with one person is sharing their knowledge with another, so maybe you're imagining a conversation while you're watching the news with your folks or with a friend, and they're saying something kind of ignorant, not necessarily badly intentioned, but you correct them with the knowledge that you've gained. Maybe a story, some kind of written thing. Keep in mind, though, that creativity is good, but sometimes students really struggle when they get to be creative and write some creative artistic thing. You still have to fulfill the criteria up here, right? Your creative written work still has to provide an overview of the topic and bring up these things here, right? So no matter what format you choose, it has to kind of wind up accomplishing this. And that's not always easy when you're used to doing traditional academic essays, but it can be done. All right. Now, option 3 is where you can mix things up a little bit. If you want to get some practice writing an academic paper, you'd write one, but it would be shorter. The same criteria as number 1 with your intro, development, and conclusion would be a bit shorter, but it can be accompanied by a relevant piece of visual art, either a photo montage, a piece of visual art, like if you paint or draw, or you're a photographer, or it can be images found online, but remember about copyright and stuff, you would need to cite them properly. A musical piece, a video, some kind of creative visual thing, in which case the essay would be worth 10% and the creative portion would be worth 5%. Now, if your creative visual, so if it's an abstract painting or something that is not immediately clear, you would still need a little artist statement, kind of like they do in museums sometimes. If you go to museums, there's a sculpture or something. Oh yeah, sculpture, right? You could do that. Any kind of artistic thing that's not written, right? And then you would have like a little explanation of how it's linked to the topic and what it represents, all right? If it's not immediately clear. And finally, option 4 is similar, where you do a short academic paper. Okay, so again, same criteria as here for number 1, but shorter, accompanied by an exchange with peers over Zoom. So how those of you who've come to a few of the Zoom discussions, you know how chill it is. It would be similar to that. We would do this on Monday, May 10th, 4 to 5:30, which is allocated in our schedule. And so whoever wants to do option 4, you'd show up, and other people could come and listen in from the class if they wanted to, but I don't think it would be a very good group. So here you would do an actual presentation, but it wouldn't be all stuffy like a typical in-class thing. We'd be going for the same vibe as we do in the Zoom discussions. You'd speak longer, obviously, because you're going to want to summarize the work that you did, what you learned. You wouldn't go over everything, but say maybe take 5 to 8 minutes to give us a summary of what you did in your project. And if you want to kind of do that, a variation on that option too is to kind of pre-record it, and then we can if there are people who sign up for this option, we can talk about whether, everybody wants to record their thing and then send it to the others who are participating in this in advance. We watch it and then we discuss it during the Zoom session, or if they're shown, people screen share and show the video during the Zoom. We'll figure it out one way or another. This would be an opportunity to dialogue with a few other students. I suspect not a lot of people are going to want to do this. We would need at least 2 students for this to work. So if you would like to choose option 4, please let me know by April 14th at the latest, and then I'll coordinate with whatever students want to do this. Now, if you surprise me and if like 10 of you want to do this, we can try to find 2 different times, because not everybody will have time. I think at most, for us to be able to also have a conversation, we would have maybe 4 students presenting in one session. So if it goes beyond that, if you surprise me and a lot of people want to do this, which you never know, because some of you have gotten to know each other during the Zoom discussions and seen how it's nice to have these dialogues and to go back and forth. So yeah, so definitely do let me know by April 14th so I can coordinate the logistics behind it, and then we'll figure it out amongst ourselves how exactly we want to do it. So these are, you have these options. If you have other ideas, please do approach me. I mean, I can't think of everything, and if I included all the possible options in the entire world, this document would never end. So in terms of technical requirements, this is what, throughout the semester and the weekly stuff, we always know which document we're talking about because it's in the reading questions. So I haven't been doing any of the APA stuff, but I do by ministry objectives, like our big final project has to kind of abide by certain criteria in the social sciences. So here, you need, regardless of the format, you're writing something. So you have to have an APA style reference list. So there are 2 if you like videos, you can click here. There's a video done by the TASC at Vanier. What does TASC stand for again? Tutoring and Student something. Anyway, that place where they offer tutoring. And then there's also a document that they produced it's about APA citations and reference lists. And you're going to need citations in the text as well. So if this is not familiar to you because it's been a while, you remember that when you write a paper, you have to, always indicate where you got your information, and that's called a citation, right? And in APA, if you remember seeing this, it's like the author's last name in brackets, in parentheses, I should say, with the year of publication, and then all the sources get listed at the end in your reference list. So you all need that reference list. If those of you who are choosing options 1, 3, and 4, where there's an academic paper, then you're going to do your in-text citations APA style with the author, date, and sometimes page number and again here this is the link to the same document, but it has both citations and reference lists, and here's a video specifically about in-text citations. Now, those of you who are choosing option 2 and writing a creative piece like a story or a play or something like that, it would be awkward to include APA citations. It'll ruin the flow of your text. So what you could do is just have footnotes. And if you're not sure how to do that in Word, book a time with me and I'll show you. It's very easy. And then in the footnote, you would put what you would usually put in the in-text citation. So instead of having it in the text where it kind of breaks up things to have like, I don't know, Patel, comma, 2012, comma, page 38, you would just put that in a footnote at the bottom of the page. And so that'll make things nicer, right? And just to remember, because students, in my experience, often get confused about the difference between citations and quotations. So a citation is where you indicate the source of your information, and you have to do that even when you paraphrase, okay? And most of your paper should be paraphrased because that's how we indicate that we actually learned something, okay? You shouldn't have a lot of direct quotations, which is where you put things in quotation marks because it's word for word from your source. I always make the equivalence. It's like salt. If you put a bit of salt in your food, it kind of adds a nice touch. It spices things up a little bit. But if you put too much, then it's too salty. If you put too many quotations, it just burdens your text because you have all these quotation marks in your text, and you're not really showing that you learned something, because anybody can just take a quotation, and it actually requires a certain level of skill to properly insert a quotation because it has to be seamless with the rest of your sentence. All right, so it's easier to just put things in your words a lot of the time, and if you're struggling to do that, it means you're having trouble understanding the text, in which case you write to your teacher Jackie, and you ask for support in that, and I'll look at what you're struggling with and help you. Okay. So here, so citation, you indicate the source of your information, regardless, even if it's, again, if it's paraphrased. So it looks like this, right? So vowel 2016, page 26. And then I have to do that definitely with a quotation. For regular citations for paraphrasing, you don't always have to put the page number. It's safer. When in doubt, just put it. Okay? But it's definitely obligatory for direct quotations. So you should have at least 4 sources cited in your paper, but there's no maximum if you have 5 or 6 sources. And the majority of your sources should be Indigenous, so an Indigenous author, filmmaker, because documentaries are fine too, right? Any of the videos we watched or other videos so we're not basing ourselves just on like academic essays or books here. So, so if you have 4 sources, say 3 of them should be by Indigenous authors or filmmakers or organizations, at least, best if they're all by Indigenous producers, but at least the majority should. So in terms of how you're going to be marked on this little assessment grid here, I know some of your teachers sometimes have these grids with all the boxes, and I've tried those, and they have their pros and cons, and I think that for something like this where we're trying to be a bit flexible and fluid, I find they can make everything feel very boxed in. They make marking easier at my end, but I find that in terms of giving feedback, it's limited. So I like doing this where I kind of actually give the number of marks associated with each thing, and then I give explanations in the paper itself. So the paper itself, so again, depending on which option you pick, because remember, if you're doing just an academic paper or just a creative piece, it's that writing is 15%, but if you're choosing one of these two, then the essay is worth 10, and the other components, say the artistic work or the presentation, are worth 5. Okay, but they'll be marked out of 100 just to make it easier, and then the percentage will change depending on which option you pick. So that's what I mean here by the 10 to 15% depending on the option chosen. So regardless, so whether it's an academic paper or a creative piece, your paper has to provide a clear overview of the topic, and that's worth most of your paper, 70%. So your arguments are backed up by explanations and examples for the sources. This means that you wouldn't just make a general statement and not give backup from your sources. Okay, this is a very important skill. Even when we're thinking of Indigenous knowledge, it can look different the way that it's done, but it's just you do need to kind of avoid just making generalizations without giving some kind of meat to it. All right, why are you saying this? What are you basing yourself on? And credit in your sources. Like, you didn't invent this knowledge; you got it from your sources. Which ones? All right. And again, this is back from the beginning, right? Discussing why the topic is important for people to know about. You're going to go into a bit of depth. If I'm giving 15 points out of 100 for this, it's a clue that it's still significant. You wouldn't just write like one line, and it doesn't. And then the last point too. How does this knowledge have an impact on your own life, right? So again, 15 and 15 here. So for a total of 100. Now I split it up like this, but you're not stuck necessarily doing the overview for say 4 or 5 paragraphs and then having a paragraph on the second point and another paragraph on that last point. It can be woven together, especially if you're doing creative. So as long as your paper does these things, it doesn't matter what order it's in. Okay, it still has to be logical, especially if you're doing an academic paper. A good one follows a certain logic, so I'll be marking according to that. If you're doing a creative piece, then you can explore ways of doing this, right? And this is something we can talk about. We can talk about this and brainstorm it. Just let me know. Now, those of you who choose, say, option 3, where you have a small paper like this, a smaller paper, I should say, and a visual art piece, well, here it will be assessed on, the relevance, right? So either it has to have a clear connection to the topic that's discussed in the academic paper, or an artist's statement to clarify the connection, all right? And so that's that for that. And similar with the presentation, right? So the presentation, either if it's pre-recorded or done on Zoom, as we'll discuss for the people who choose this option, it needs to provide an accurate and clear overview of what was in the paper, right? And that's most of your mark. And because the whole idea with doing this format is that there's engagement between the people that are there. So that means that you need to be there the whole time and kind of respond to other people's presentations and answer questions or comments that they might have about your presentation. And we're going to go again for a chill vibe here where none of us are kind of judging each other. We're just like, oh yeah, that was great, and I'd like to know more about that, or so it's not a judgment thing, it's just engagement, again, as we've been doing in the Zoom discussions. So those are the points that you're going to rack up for each individual part, and then there might be penalties. So if there are no citations and no reference list in your academic paper, I can't accept it. I'll give it back to you, and then you're going to have to add that because that's plagiarism and I can't accept it. And if you don't resubmit something, then you're unfortunately just going to get a 0 for that. If you use citations and the reference list, you do them, but you make mistakes and you're not following APA format, there will be a range of penalties there. If it's just a couple of mistakes, maybe 1 point. If it's like really you I can tell you didn't even look at the guides, then you might lose a lot of points. If you don't have the full 4 sources that are required, up to 10 points can be lost there. If you have fewer than 3 sources, and again, this is proportional to the 4 here. So if out of your 4, you have less than 3 that are by Indigenous authors, filmmakers, again, there's a range, right? So if there's half and half, or if you only have 1 Indigenous source, and again, it'll be proportional. So I'll probably reword this now that I'm looking at it, because if you wind up having 7 sources and you only have 3 that are by Indigenous authors, then you don't have the majority of them that are Indigenous. So it'll match the proportion there. Here again, I've been harping on this all semester with the little weekly quizzes and the bigger quiz, and after week 3, I started removing points when people weren't doing this properly. It's important. It's a respectful thing. So here I expect the correct use of vocabulary. So Indigenous, Aboriginal, First Nations. Again, being specific about the group you're talking about. If you're doing your project on the Oka standoff of 1990, you're talking about the Ganyangaga people, not just Indigenous or First Nations people. Capitalization, singular use, right? Un-Indigenous culture, not Indigenous culture at large, things like that, right? So depending on how severe the problems are, there's a range there. And if you struggle with writing, there's support here that you can get. So if you click here, you'll see the schedule. You can get tutors. They expect you to come with the assignment and what you've done so far, and then they'll help you. They won't fix everything for you, but you can choose to work on a specific issue that you struggle with, like paragraph structure or even sentence structure, okay? So page 3, again, I'm not going to go in detail. I'll look at this first page and then I'll show you a list of suggested topics that you can look at on your own. So how to start? First of all, like what I'd suggest if you're like, well, what do I even want to do for this? You can start by thinking about, well, are there topics we've covered in the course that you'd like to know more about? It can even be a small thing that was mentioned in one of the readings or videos or in our discussion that you'd like to explore in greater depth, and then you can start with those sources, look at the end, like Chelsea Vowell, each of her chapters has tons of references that some of them are online and that you can look at, right? Are there 2 or 3 topics we've covered that you'd like to weave together to explore the connection? So I give some examples here. So for example, there's been kind of a common thread through the first half of the semester about the relationship to the land, and almost everything that we've done since those initial discussions about the land, we've wound up being able to make connections, right? So if you wanted to do that, you might not even have to go look for new sources. You can just take sources that we have and kind of weave the topics together somehow. Relationship to the land and treaties, same idea. Treaties, which we learned about. We spent 2 weeks on treaties, and now we're starting to learn about the Indian Act. There are definitely connections there. Or there might be other examples, but again, I can't list them all. So you might have ideas, and you can talk to me about it. Are there things that came up in your dialogue, our dialogue, there's a typo there, in your journal, right? So, again, I mentioned that before. You can look at our conversation, and if I said, oh, hey, this would make a good topic, you don't have to, right? You don't have to choose that, but it's an idea. Are there topics related to your career choice, family background, hobby, or some other thing you're passionate about? So in your journals, again, some of you have told me like you're going into nursing, you're interested in law or teaching or journalism. Well, these are all things you could look up, like, Indigenous people in these fields, or particular issues that affect Indigenous peoples in these fields. Or some of you have shared about your family backgrounds, like, your families are from different places in the world, or, just even from around here, but you grew up maybe near a reserve, but you didn't know anything about the people there. Or maybe you have some Indigenous people from somewhere else in the world in your family, and you want to compare stuff that's going on back home to stuff that's happened here. Or a hobby. Some of you are musicians, some of you like to paint, or, are photographers, or just any kind of hobby that you have. You really like animals. I mean, just all these things, there are options there that you could look into. Sports, right? There's a lot of material on it, Indigenous people in sports. Whether it's kind of the big leagues, or just, in schools and things like that, mascots. And here's some other ideas, like if none of these questions are helpful to you, here are some kind of broad ideas. You can explore these resources here and come up with your own topic based on these things, or a blend of the above, or something new. So you can leaf through Chelsea Vowell's chapters. Like I said, they have extensive reference lists at the end of each chapter. Here there's online, there's the Indigenous Peoples Atlas of Canada, and if you click on the First Nations section, there are a whole bunch of topics there that you can go, oh yeah, I'd like to learn more about this, and then find more sources. There's this link here is to a resource platform that we're working on at the intercollegiate level between Vanier, John Abbott, Dawson, Champlain. And you can kind of click on that one, and it takes you to the home board, and there are tons and tons, like hundreds of resources already there, even though it's still under construction. So if you're not sure and you just want to kind of go play around and look at what's there, and you find something that, oh hey, there's a source, I want to read this and learn more, and then that can get you started. And there are sub boards on there that you have specific links to, so you can explore any of these things. It's like you're into history or you're into media. The media board includes film, dance, music, graphic novels, literature, all kinds of stuff. So those are some options. Here, if you click, if you're interested in family, children, youth, issues around that, there's an academic journal on, I think it's First Peoples Caring Society or something like that. So a lot of stuff there, and this is more academic, but it's mostly from Indigenous perspectives. So you can click there and see if there's anything that catches your eye. Some of you might have gotten notifications that I posted just yesterday on Leia. There's a section now with presentations that have happened at Vanier and that are recorded. Some of them, the ones from this March, are only available until March 31st. And I also put Kaylee's presentation from, not Kaylee, Maite Saganash, who is EU from up north, and she presented at Vanier during the Social Science Festival, and her presentation is still available. So you can look under Leia, under distributed documents. There's a whole section of videos there on presentations, and so maybe one of them's on theater, one of them is by Amanda, who came to art class, but on art. And how it's considered to be an animate being in her culture, and so that's all interesting stuff. There's one about male violence against Indigenous women. If you're into film, like NFB has made their entire Indigenous collection available for free. So if you click here, it takes you to, and there's like hundreds of film there. So you can scroll and see if there's anything that catches your eye. And some of them are short, but they can give you an idea of a topic. And then, finally, on the following pages, there's a very long list of topics. So, and I give some suggested sources, so you can scroll through this. I'm not going to go into it now in detail because that'll take another half hour, and we're going on a half hour already. So just a warning here, it's important. The first few topics have a little asterisk. Those contain material about abusive situations, and so if you're a survivor of abuse, or you've witnessed abuse in your life and you're not ready for that right now to deal with that kind of topic, you might want to stay away from those. Okay, at some point, these are things that need to be kind of learned about. You know, what happened in residential schools, or the 60s scoop, or missing and murdered women and girls. But if you're not ready right now, then you have tons of other things that you can explore. All right, so just if you do pick one of these topics, even if you haven't survived abuse or witnessed abuse, it can still be very difficult, especially since some of it involves children. So just be mentally prepared, have a support network, people you can talk to. So just scroll through this and see if there are things there. And some of them have a lot of links because it's stuff I've read a lot about. I work in this, obviously there's more links there, but it doesn't mean you have to look at all of these. This one's really cool. First People's Post-Secondary Storytelling Exchange. I put it under education, but also under Indigenous children and youth, because this is something that was done locally by a colleague at Dawson, who is Métis, and some other people. And there's a bunch of short videos by Indigenous youth who are in CEGEP and university and talking about their experiences. And so for any of you interested in the voices of Indigenous youth, or in education more broadly, have a look at that. It's very interesting stuff. And so different topics here, some of them overlap, but you can just kind of look at any of these things that catch your eye and look at the sources, and then if you're stuck and you want more sources, we can talk. And some of these sometimes are links to, places where multiple sources are gathered together. So you'll see that sometimes it looks like one thing, but it leads to a bunch of other things. So there you go. That's the project. Take some time, sometime soon, to look this over. Actually, built into the reading assignment for week 10 is to look at this and start looking at one source. So that's what we're going to do. Every week you're going to be working on this a little bit. So when it comes time to write your paper or do your project, you'll already have a lot of the reading for it done. Okay? So there you go. Let me know if you have any questions.